Dive, rise by dog with a banana. Warfare was always meant as a last resort in achieving the means deemed important enough to pay with blood, with land, and we've only expanded that with the stars since interstellar travel was invented. And we've only become more articulate and learned in the ways of death, intimidation, and coercion. Was this inevitable? Of course it was. It was to be as long as we were to be. But we are. That is the sapient condition, in perpetua. Redacted Coalition Security Counselor, circa 2687. Step by step, one by one. The marching of military shoes in an almost single sound by how synchronized they were. I felt how tense my shoulders were. I felt so in control. My jaw was tight, my neck was frozen, but my chin was held high. Eyes front, I was ordered to. My legs lifted in such a practiced way it was as if I wasn't moving them myself. It was second nature after it was basically beaten into my body at this point. Basic's a bitch. Such is life. Just don't bump into anyone else in the formation or else it's all over. I can't see what's ahead of me. I'll be told when to stop, though. Just trust. 1, 1, 2, 1. My ears twitch. Thank goodness the human drill sergeants didn't chew me out for that habit. I just can't help it. Without even turning my eyes, I hear the order to stop and march in place. This is it. We're told to halt. Right face. The bleachers are filled with people of all kinds. Some have proud and blatant smiles, while others are more stoic. But they were staring at us. The first batch to be introduced as graduates. It's almost hard to believe I got in with them. I'm not really good for much. Well, besides fighting and fucking. We salute our addressing officer. He has a funny hat. Oh, wait. It's exactly like ours, except it's white. And now here's the speech. It's like he's talking to us, but he's not. These are just words meant for the civilians, so we're branded as heroes for whoever we're fighting for. I honestly didn't even keep track. But that just makes me ask myself what I was doing this whole time. Did I just black out during all that? I remember I did push-ups, endured shouting and spittle landing right in my ear and face. I just did what I said. I was good at that. Maybe that was how I came here. I can feel my mouth start to creak into a smirk. Was it pride? I really can't tell. I'm really just numb from all of this. I didn't even sleep last night, but it never makes a difference. Rest or no rest, I just keep going no matter what. I really can't remember the last time I had a peaceful night of sleep. I can't remember the quiet. It's stupid. I worked so hard to get here, and now I'm only thinking about wanting to leave. But where to? This should just be the beginning, I think. Private Brutus, PB, and J shit, eyes front. And may you, fine graduates, continue to serve our great... I couldn't hear the big star officer through all the cheers of the people behind him. There were archaic camera flashes amongst the muted, sleek, and dark devices you could almost see through because of how thin they were. Devices that were silently filming us with whatever several megapixels they had in this day and age. We salute again. The band starts to play, and they open the barriers between us and the bleachers. Families start to pour in and spread out through our loose formation, armed with smiles, cameras, and arms reaching for hugs. My comrades start to be overwhelmed one by one, especially the ones next to me and in front of me. I keep my smile up. Within this crowd, I sort of feel alone. I look up at the bleachers for a familiar face. Familiarly structured and colored faces are the best that I can come up with, and I'm only made more aware of my isolated self. Aware of the tightness of my shoulders, I let out a sigh to breathe, and we're finally told to fall out. I don't have to stay in place, but I really don't have anywhere else to go. It's as much of a hassle to get out of this tight uniform as it was to put it on and make sure everything was in place to the very centimeter. So I just think again. I think about, well, firstly of how alone I am, for one thing. Or maybe not. I turn my head and lean forward. I'm taller than most people in this crowd, and I try to spot the one guy who was most helpful and friendly to me throughout basic. He wasn't the type to be attention-hungry, and he really was popular too. Poor guy made himself a target for the sake of all of us, so he's definitely going places here. Me, well, I'm not sure where I'm going, but I need to see him at least and congratulate him. There he is. He's surrounded and conversing with fellow batchmates, but hey, at least we're on the same boat in the no family department. No, bad Brutus. That's not a good thing, I think. I don't see a civilian around him. He was a Rokandan, like me, canine type. I think the humans called him something like a Doberman. He had mostly dark fur with tan colors around his ears, chin, and body and whatnot. From what I remembered from the showers, he looked awesome in his uniform. If not a bit inflated, his muscles were bigger than mine. I was skinny before, but I am glad to say I did gain some weight in my muscles. Wasn't much else to do in training besides more training. I take off my hat and put on my toothy smile. I greet him and we meet eyes even in the congested crowd. "Brutus, congratulations, brother," he says as he brushes through his entourage to me. Don't I feel special? I clasp my hand in his with a brief hug. "Congratulations to you too, Doonan," I say, but my tone comes out a little raspy and sheepish. But I do smile my widest at least. He smiles back and pats me further on the back before he starts with a pointed tap on my chest. "Oh, hey, we're going out drinking tonight. We're going all out and you should come. Come on." He wiggles me with his arm around me, having to be a little on his toes to reach my shoulder height, but I have no doubt in my mind he could bear hug me to death. I laugh a little. Okay, just let me know when that happens, okay?" I pat his hand and he lets go with another rough pat on my back, slinking back into the entourage that oh so patiently waited for his return. I'm closed out again, but I smile and brush out of the crowd towards the barracks. Finally, I'm out of the uniform I so carefully hung outside my closet so I could have something to stare at. Being honest, I did prefer being in just my boxers. I wiggle my toes from being crammed in those marching boots. I was listening to the music and cheering outside the dorm. I didn't even bother turning the lights on from inside. All the lights outside were on and peeking through the blinds, and the music was loud enough it was like the window was open. But despite all that, I was just too distracted by staring at my uniform in the dark. I let out a small chuckle from the absurdity. Today should be a good day, but I've graduated and now I've got a whole career ahead of me. But it's a career of fixing mechanical machinery and cars. They really wanted me in there because they knew I liked carrying stuff. Didn't really bother to teach me much about the machines, but hey, I learned by myself and I really impressed the chiefs. But that's all I've to look forward to. What's the best that could happen to me then? I just become a chief at some point unless I get deployed out to some unknown planet to do the same thing, but with full armor gear and have a risk of a shelling on my location at all times. I audibly hear myself sigh through the muffled music. I chuckle again. Who am I kidding? I just came here in the military to run away from something. Boy, did I run. But now I have no idea where I am now. I'm just running and I think it'd be nice to have something clear to run towards. Besides, whatever this is. Today was supposed to be a good day. Knock, knock, go to the door. It was too close to the music, so I heard it again. Knock, knock, it's my dormitory door. I hear Doonan on the other side of the door. It's a voice much easier to hone out from all the whoops and hollers from the people outside. I think I'm going to be one of them soon, I call out. Oh, just a minute. I dress myself with an olive green shirt and cargo shorts and greet Doonan from the other side of the door. He's alone and in a non-standard coat. It was leather and biker style, the collar was pulled up, and it sort of made Doonan look more punk-like. Guess it fits his maverick style. He had his charisma work out for him when he was volunteered for squad lead time and time again. He nods upwards to me. He was definitely looser out of formation. That's what I sort of liked about him. He was definitely someone you could hang out with no matter what. He chuckles at my outfit. Nice. That's all he says. Rude. But we meet eyes again, and he nods to me. Yeah, hey. I managed to drag off a few crates of brews from the party to a more quiet spot, you know. I know you don't really like crowded and loud places, so I was thinking we go to a corner on base and just sit and chill. You good with that? He holds up his left hand in a gun gesture, waiting for my reply. Waiting. I smile and nod. I'm honestly flattered. He's never given me this much friendship before. I lean out of the door and look both ways, making Doonan do the same. Just us? I ask. Doonan nods, laughing. Yeah, just us. Everyone else is in their own group anyways, and he pats my chest, and then his in another gesture. Between us, I'm sort of tuckered out from the crowds myself, you know? He chuckles and steps back from the door so I can exit as well, locking the door behind myself as we walk, and soon the music becomes more muffled and distant. Now it's just bass of the beat in the air. We're now on a platform overlooking a section of the base that's right at the end of the whole installation. It had 3 rings of walls and fences and towers along each corner, placed in weaves to give each other views and shots, covering each other's blind spots. I watched the whole view, and the sky's already dark. There were radiant floodlights around the towers facing outwards, mostly set to face whatever was beyond those walls. Surrounded by plains that we marched, a distant tree line and a dense forest. A developed city was miles and miles away. This whole place was reserved for soldiers to train and live away from civilian comforts, preparing us for what was to come. Then again, that was never really made clear. There were patrols along every wall. Every soldier was decked out in battle gear, long rifles, high-tech helmets with microphones, headphones, and visors that had long scopes. They almost didn't look like organics. Then again, I knew they were. We were reassured that they were. Artificial intelligence androids and the like have yet to be integrated into the military, but I hear lots of talk that they're going to be mainstream. There's a huge pushback because of fears of hacking and skepticism of stigmas against them. Talks of EMP grenades wiping out a whole team of AI. But I know they'll be big one day. One day. For now, I just hear they're starting to make some that look like us, androids, and some that are just designed to be practical. They could honestly come in all shapes and sizes, but that's all somewhat too large for me to think about. The military base was monolithic in area size. We stood on a large metal platform that overlooked the multiple complexes below. Some had their lights on, some didn't. It was vacant. I think it was the facility and officers' complex. They weren't celebrating, it seems. Or maybe they were, in the uptight way. I turned my head to the flatter area, which we called the ports, but it had huge hangars on the sidelines. Sometimes we would train there. It was as large as a 3x2 of football fields, something 100 meters. I don't really know, I barely passed marksmanship assessments. But I did pretty well at martial arts. I guess I can thank my somewhat tall height for it. It was pretty easy to lift people by their waist and pin them down after a body throw. No one really wanted to fight with me after that. But they did start calling me Brutus then on. As I watch, I notice some lights at the corners of the ports start to glare brightly. Lights protrude from compartments on the extremely flat surface, illuminating landing paths, and I lift my head expectantly. Sirens of the ports blare in the distance, so loud that it's somewhat at a normal volume to us on the high and faraway platform. And I see it. Blue lights that outline a behemoth of a spaceship just starting to become a silhouette behind the clouds. Blinking red lights on what seems to be the tail, it pierces through the clouds, and it has the Rokondan insignia burned onto it. But it also had some green fish over a wavy line on its side as it turned to starboard. It was just making its landing. A few smaller ships also come through the clouds soon after to land by it. I can spot a small welcoming party walking towards the ships from the entrance of the ports, holding onto their hats so they wouldn't fly away from the powerful air from the ship's thrusters. I flick my right ear at the crack and fizz of a beer bottle opening. One bottle is then held up by my muzzle and I hear the fizzing bubbles. The bottle is wiggled by Doonan slightly and I chuckle and take it with a nod. Thanks. I speak softly and raise my bottle and so does he. We clink our bottles together and take a sip. It isn't cold enough the way I'd like it, but oh well, it's the company that counts. I turn my head to watch Doonan just taking his sip. He must have taken a moment before doing so. The wind starts to whip against us at this height, and I retreat to sit down on a nearby metal folding chair. I watch Doonan take another moment of watching the view before turning to join me in a chair nearby. Now we can see less of the buildings below and more of the sky. Drones fly high in the sky as well, but not equipped with spotlights. They're instead equipped with long-scoped cameras to catch anyone sneaking outside the perimeter. And then there's a hovering satellite just a mile over the base, staying there in a static position. Some people call it some kind of weather monitoring device, but an acquaintance working at the Signal Corps says they detect missiles. incoming ships or planes. "Did you really just spend the day in your rack?" Doonan asks, his smile bright in the dimly lit area we're staying in. The only light we have is the light we left on in the room which we used to enter the platform, which was basically a balcony. He sips as I think up my reply. I don't want to be too depressing to this guy. It could make things awkward. "Well, I was pretty tired. They made us report 3 hours early, you know?" I tap on the glass of the beer bottle with my claws. Doonan doesn't reply immediately, but my eyes are on the ground. I can somehow feel his gaze burning my ears. I speak again with a little rasp. "I was the only one who chose to go with the mechs in our batch, so I'm pretty much not going to see you guys anymore." I feel a lump in my throat growing, so I gulp it down as hard as I can. Keeping connection seems to be a problem for me, so I just move forward. I rub my neck. It's probably better that way, you know? Easier for all of us. And in that moment, I felt a small punch hit my shoulder. It's definitely firm enough to feel. I turn my head with a smile, and Doonan has some disappointment in his eyes, though his smile is still on. "God, I feel bad for you, dude," Doonan says as he leans back into the chair with a quiet creak. He takes a sip and he starts speaking before he finishes gulping. "You're too big to forget, Brutus. You leave an impression on anyone you talk to. Some people think you're too nice to be here, you know?" We lock gazes. I'm intrigued, and I watch him expectantly for him to say more. He takes the hint and continues with a lean forward with his elbows on his knees. "Like, you're so quiet even when we're supposed to be yelling out. You let people walk over you, but you don't let anyone walk over others. Are you masochistic or something?" Doonan and I share a laugh, and I can only shrug and take a sip. I don't really know what to say. I don't want to make too much of a name for myself. I realized that wasn't for me because it was all somewhat overwhelming. That day in the ring when my sparring partner was writhing on the ground after a brutal pin. All I heard were the cheers and whoops, a sergeant walking over to check on my somewhat victim before glancing up at me. "You could have been a little easier on the guy." You can never really do anything right in basic training. "Nah," I let out a reply and shrug once more as I glanced back at Doonan. "That's just me, you know?" Doonan: "I really just think you're one huge teddy bear, but with claws and teeth." My eyes lock on the ground again as I reflect. Those words make me wonder if they're true or not, if I want them to be or not, or I just think too much, stupid Brutus. You really can't shake this habit off, can you? I drag my eyes back up to his and smile, my tail wagging behind myself. "You kept your choice of special training secret, Doonan. And," I rub my neck, "well, you know, I'd like to know what you're going to be up to when the morning comes." Doonan takes a moment and puts a finger to his lips with a raised brow at me. It seemed that he wanted me to stay quiet about what he wanted to say. That intrigued me more. Why would he want to keep this secret? I leaned forward to listen closely and nod. He nods and just replies in almost a whisper, "Intelligence. Enough said." "Intelligence? No way!" I let out aloud incredulously and laugh as he just briefly gives a look of disbelief, pretend winding up a punch for me as I laugh again. I look at him as our chuckles quiet down. The intelligence field needed a perfect score in whatever tests they would give so you would qualify. And even then, that place was elite. Well, it's what I hear anyways. You could be the smartest, toughest guy around, but you wouldn't have a chance to get even a foot in the door if you didn't have the secret sauce, whatever that was. "Well, how'd you get on that ticket then? Will you tell me?" I ask in a tone that I hope could convince him, trying to sound a little meeker than I already am, perhaps with some flirtation mixed in there. My tail wags expectantly, but he just gives a sour look. I don't really know if I'm expecting him to really answer my question. Probably it's just so that I get to hear him talk some more. He shakes his head. "I just got in, you know? I applied and they accepted me. That's really just it." He says matter-of-factly, and leaves it at that with the end of his tone. It's obvious he doesn't want to continue, so I just run my head back towards the view. The ships have seemingly finished docking. I'm sure they go through a good 15 minutes of safety procedures before even thinking about opening the shuttle doors and ramp. The party seems to include the star officer that congratulated us earlier. Him and his entourage welcome some white-dressed people that just step off the deck, a few guards with them, and some machinery. Mustn't be a dignitary because 1. Now? Really? On graduation day? 2. We're not all lined up nice and purty for these people, even though they look important. 3. They don't look like dignitaries, though. They seem casual, and I think they're wearing lab coats. I take a sip of my beer bottle, and my ear flicks to my name being called by Doonan. He's definitely a little mellowed out like I am from the warm beer in our bellies. I again fidget with my claws, tapping on the bottle glass as I turn my head. He's looking at me, and he speaks softly again. I'm sort of worried they just accepted me like that. You know? I'm nobody. He said that with some abrupt doubt in his eyes that catches me off guard, and I just blink to make sure I'm not seeing things in the dim light. He stands up after putting his hands in his pockets, more of the wind breezing and whipping at us quietly. He turns to me. I actually didn't expect to get in. It was just a try, and I really didn't plan ahead. Nobody gets in without giving something. And it's more than just what duty is, you know? I don't know if I'd have what they're going to ask for. I tilt my head as he thinks aloud, watching him silently. But I do feel a shared uneasiness. Someone like Doonan, who's confident and a meticulous planner, is starting to show signs of cold feet. He waves the thought away and leans on the railing on the edges of the platform. Yeah, forget it, Doonan says with a wistful sigh. I drop my bottle and move to stand with him, giving him a reassuring pat on the back. Look, I'm sure you had an idea of what's going on there, and that you'll adapt into it pretty easily. I say with a tremble. I really don't want to screw up in making him feel better. We came here to the military to find a purpose. You told us all once that you came to serve. You didn't just say that, right? No, of course not. He looks at me with furrowed brows, and it makes me furrow mine as well. We're a little uneasy, I can feel. And I just let my hand go from his back. His expression was one of deep thought, but at my words, and it wasn't the pleasant kind, nor was it too far into the negative. But negative is negative to me, and that means failure. I just sigh and tighten my shoulders, hoping to try and relieve the tension by going back to my chair for my drink. My tongue is starting to feel dry. You'll be a great intelligence specialist. You know? Traveling space, going undercover, Casanova style. Now that'd be the life. I raise my bottle at him with a wink, and he just gives a half scoff and a half chuckle. That's a win. We sit together again and look at each other. He speaks first. You know, maybe we should just sit and relax without talking for a minute. He smiles. I'm not offended. I'm honestly happy to hang around with someone I'd consider a friend. Even if it's in silence, I can appreciate trying to be comfortable in that space. Because if you can't, can you really consider that friendship? I'd like to take a sniff of the view as well, before I join the great fleet in the stars. I watch Doonan lock the doors that we entered by. He seems to have been trusted with the key to it by the officer who maintains this place. Like I said, this guy has charisma. As we turn to start making our way back to the barracks, we find 2 officers making their way towards us. They didn't have badges on, so they're not MPs. Phew. But they're trying to make eye contact. They're in our path, and we slow down. I sigh under my breath, but raise my brows to at least look friendly. Doonan steps forward. Since we're both out of uniform, he just nods with a small smile to them. Good evening, sirs. He greets them, and they only nod back. Both of them are junior officers, and the one at the rear of the forward one seems to be the junior of the juniors, holding a clipboard. They're focusing on Doonan like I'm not even there, so I stand there awkwardly, respectfully at the very least. The older officer speaks, handing forward a piece of paper. Private Sung, Commander Ramus is requesting your presence. Doonan looks a little confused, but then he replies straight, commissioned or not, you had to make sensible and reasonable communication within the chain. It was life or death otherwise. Commander Ramus, I'm afraid I don't recognize him from my command structure, sir. He then tilts his head ever so slightly, waiting for a response. The officer glances at his other, then replies, He's your new section commander, under Experimentative Warfare Command. The officer then raises his hand as Dunan starts to look even more confused, his shoulders tense from the surprise effect. I knew that he hated surprises. He was really cautious, and for things to go wrong after all that effort can get to him. This development seemed like it came out of nowhere to him. The officer continues, "I know this is a sudden development, Private, but I've been assured that this is a better step for you. We can further discuss it when you're there." He steps aside and gestures to the way. Dunan and I exchange glances. The junior of the two officers then whispers to their other after glancing at their clipboard and having looked me over. The forward officer then nods to me. "Ah, right. You too, Private Brutus. You are requested as well." We're not even in uniform, and we're supposed to meet a commander. If they're from the fleet, they're probably high up there. But I'm also being summoned as well. This is concerning. I'm already a little thirsty from the anxiousness. But I glanced back to Dunan, who was staying cool and collected. It was clear that I was looking at him, and I think he knew. But he didn't even turn his head to look at me. Soon enough, we reached a building with one poor MP at the gate. They were just finished with radioing in our approach, and they opened the door for us. We enter the building and pass a desk sergeant that just watches us pass, but there was something in his eyes that didn't seem right. It could be that he must have had the overnight shift. Or there was a glint of pity in his eyes. Nah, I just made that up. I couldn't really tell what his look was. Now, we're at the officer's door. We're all quiet until the senior of the junior officers makes their lesser knocks on the door and announces himself after a guard in a white uniform distinct from ours answers the door. He had a deeper voice than his senior and had a more authoritative voice. How surprising. He seemed younger and even shorter. They whisper, then nod to each other before we're let in, standing at attention in a line with the officers on the left. They render salutes, but neither myself nor Dunan renders a salute outside of uniform and a head cover. The room was rustic with flat cement walls, barely decorated with cream-colored blinds on windows with dim walkway lights peeking through. It was pretty much Spartan, but I think it's because this office was a placeholder. A temporary one. None of us knew who this guy was. The man in front of us was a white-dressed officer with 2 silver orbs, signifying the rank of fleet commander. I wish I could gulp. His white cap was on the desk, and another individual was seated to our left in front of the commander's desk. His head was craned to us with an indiscernible expression, except a stiff smile and forced eyes to convey at least a whiff of friendliness. He had a lab coat on, but besides that, everything else was military-styled. His lab coat had a long tail split at his tail, full white with ranks on the coat's epaulets. 3 golden orbs, just 2 ranks down from the commander across. Now I'm starting to feel myself sweat. Why? Why do they want us here? We have no idea who they are. No idea. "Thank you for coming," says the commander. Of course, he had a grisly voice, someone who's seen a lot, or is just tired of things. Who knows what he's tired of? I just know life's weighed him down. He spoke in a casual manner. His hands were interlocked by the fingers with his elbows on the desk. The lab officer crossed their legs with their hands set on their knees, still watching with a dead smile. The commander starts off, "Private Dunan and..." The junior officer comes forward and places down a file he kept in the clipboard in front of the commander. It seems he had already 2 files prepared for him, a discarded pile of files in a tray at the very end of the desk. The top file wasn't stamped, but one was misaligned enough that I could tell there was red ink stamped in a big square on one. The commander picks up the received file and opens it, speaking after skimming the very top. "Private Brutus." He lets out a sigh. "Our best recruit company this year, with Private Dunan as honor recruit and Private Brutus." His eyes met mine. He had a stern and scanning look in his eyes, barely making it in due to your low test scores. But you excelled in the side of performance and values, so much so that it made recompense for your shortcomings. Impressive indeed. I really didn't know where this was going, but I fidgeted with my thumb on my first behind my back. The commander continued, "You 2 are being resectioned. I requested you 2 personally, and I called you here to make sure you understood what you were now getting into. Now, I know you opted for different fields, but but I can let you know what you wanted to specialize in will be accommodated for in this new field you'll be assigned to, with a special opportunity that may ask you for a greater sacrifice than what you gave an oath to understand when you first came in." He nods to the lab officer, and he nods back. The commander looks back to us. "You will be resectioned out of the regular line of command and report only to Experimental Warfare Command. You are basically designated as Special Forces. Come and sign our special contract." He sighs as if he didn't want to say what came next. "And it is your choice. The benefits are—" He stands and speaks with a few mild gestures. "Your pay grades to be raised by 5 levels effective upon signage. You get to be part of a new field of war, one that can be used to end them before they even begin, used to turn the tide." My head's spinning, being punched over and over again, and I'm not allowed to breathe or recover. Specia wa? Experi wa? What is going on? I can't turn my head, but by the feeling in the air, he's emanating a freezing air around himself. The thing about his charisma is that you could feel it in the air around himself. He obviously wasn't happy about this. The commander was now pacing around his desk towards us. "This new development is combat augmentation, but I'm afraid I won't be able to go any further than that until you agree. But believe me, the results are groundbreaking. We won't have to rely more on heavy metal gear or artificial intelligence, but rather on our own selves. No hacking, no responsibility of property, except yourselves." He harumphs and clears his throat as he continues, placing his hands behind his back. "You are to be—" The lab officer chimes in. His voice was smooth and he seemed to be highly aloof, leaned back in his chair with an arm draped over the top of the seat. "Super soldiers." The commander thanks the other, then returns to glancing at the two of us. "That's right, super soldiers. The first of your kind." "Why us, sir?" Dunan seems to have had enough and chimed in with a question. I'm sure everyone in the room wanted to turn their heads, and yet only the commander and the lab officer did. The commander only glanced back at him in response. Dunan continued with some very subtle venom behind his tongue. "Why choose us, out of all the others in our batch?" The command sighed, and I could hear the lab officer chuckle. The former rounds back to the other side of the desk and opens both our files. "Both of you have no family or connections of any kind. The only ones with such circumstances in the batch, the best of the best. Like I said, we'll be asking for a greater sacrifice from you. And, before you cut in again, Private Dunan." He put down his hand he had preemptively raised to halt any protests by Dunan. "Cryogenics. Soldiers. You are expected to willingly put yourself under cryogenic stasis. For how long? Who knows? But that comes with repercussions we have decades to learn as of yet. That's why we ask a lot of you. It's no easy ask, I can be honest there." He leaves it there like he had something else to say, but he never continued, sitting back down again as he then sat with a quiet creak of his large chair. We're standing silently. All we could hear was the buzz of a light on the ceiling and a whir of a fan on the commander's desk, facing himself and on rotation towards the lab officer. "Speak freely," the commander says, and I finally look at Dunan. He's silent, and his jaw is close to popping. My eyes get lost in the wood of the desk. The textures, light color patterns, and swirls start to grow. Better pay, special forces, combat augmentation, I think that means surgery. Then I get to go to sleep under ice. I get iced. This sort of felt like an honor. What did I truly have to lose? I could be part of something great. Finally to make something of myself after having run away from everything. Now that I look at my other options of refusing, everything just looks bleaker, darker. And I really can't handle that. The lack of certainty. But is there ever total certainty? Besides a full leap of faith? I speak up first. "Sir, I'd like to willingly accept the offer. I would also like to thank you for it," I say, my eyes leveled to the wall, and the commander slowly stood up with his hands set on the desk. I could feel all eyes on me. "What do I sign? What should I do?" I ask, but Dunan cuts in again, hurried. "Sir, can't you give us a day or at least until morning to decide?" "No," the commander asserts. "No, that's not possible. It's now or never, Private Dunan. The ships will be leaving for a space station tomorrow morning. Scheduling is strict for this kind of operation, and we will need you to disappear if you accept. If you don't accept, you'll be watched by intelligence at all times under the Security of Information Coalition Act, and an NDA will be signed, a permanent one, even after your discharge. Doonan looks incredulous. Sir, this is preposterous. The senior officer to our farthest left snaps, You're out of order, Private. The commander groans and waves the officer off, who quiets. I get the weight of this. Could be hard on anybody. I'm not the one on the receiving end of a deal that you won't be able to come back from, but I can already tell that it could shatter your world. Make you ask a lot of questions, ones you may have avoided asking until now. But you're going to have to answer them quickly, because we need to get these things done now. Time waits for no one, and time will be your ultimate sacrifice. Doonan wobbles ever so slightly like he's dizzy. The silence is deafening afterwards, but he nods. The commander speaks up. You're going to have to speak, Private Doonan. Yes, I willingly volunteer for your program, Doonan replies. I'm in the dark of my barracks. Neither of my two roommates seem to have returned from the night before. Knowing them, they're probably sleeping over in other rooms. Final formation call is much later in the day, yet I'm exempt from it now, because I'm leaving much later, just as the sky turns sunrise purple. I get on a ship for the first time and make my way into the stars. I'm already in a new battle dress uniform. It was navy blue and white, digital camouflage. The rank I have velcroed to my chest is a symbol I don't recognize, but I'm referred to as a specialist. If that's still following the ranking system I learned, that's a huge step up from private. Overnight, congratulations me. Congratulations, Specialist Brutus. I'm sitting on my rack in the dark, immaculately made, ready to be left behind for the very next person to use this room. I'm rotating a navy blue beret in my hands, peering at the soft and hazy light peering through the blinds. In front of me is my closet, with my now defunct uniform still hanging out. I stop my rotation of the beret just to glance at the marking on it. It was a green fish again, like the ones on the ships that arrived. I remember the lab officer may have been one of the first people to disembark from the ship, but again, that was way too far away to tell clearly. But I reckon it is. I hear a knock on the door and I stand slowly. The door creaks open and Doonan peers in, a beret on his head and a sad smile on his face. At least we had each other. So I smile back. He has his duffel bag and I pick up mine. We walk out of the room and there are two officers again, outside of our rooms. White uniforms and white peaked caps. Their epaulets and shiny ranks made their shoulders look broader, made them look more menacing. I think that was the point. They had stoic faces on. Both Rokandan. Lately, it's only been Rokandan canines and a few vulpines last night. The commander was a vulpine now that I think back clearly. Dark gray fur. The lab officer had a mix of a rough collie look with the ears to match. We'll be holding your belongings for the moment, one of the officers says, and holds out a hand. Surrender your baggage, and after clearance, they'll be returned to you whilst on the ship. I hand mine over first, and the officer just passes it to the other officer. Doonan does the same, and we walk in tow with them, officers carrying things for us. Well, I'll be. I glance from the spectacle to Doonan with a readied smile, and he returns some of it, but I'm sure we're both mutually aware of the air of uneasiness coming from this and all. We're on the ports. It's a long walk towards the ship. It was larger than a football field by area. I was sure of it. The ion thrusters of this thing must be ginormous or powerful, both, most probably. It must have been 5 stories tall. A smaller cutout of a bay door opens and lays itself out to become a ramp. A more discreet entrance, and the lab officer is there to welcome us. He's taller now that I see him in person, wearing goggles that are tinted and reflective of the purple sunrise sky. He has a wide smile on his face. He bows and then gestures inside after moving aside. Once we enter, the shuttle doors start to close. If I really wanted to escape, I would have about 30 seconds to make that choice before I would be crushed or split apart by the gates if I attempted to jump out at this stage. But I can't get cold feet. I just have to keep going. Breathe. I let out a breath. The ship was a medical white-colored network of corridors on a few ends of the large receiving bay of this ship that we entered with minor lighting flanked on both sides of the room lighting upwards. There were red gates with keypads that would only turn on if you scanned a handprint, which was usually only authorized to high-ranking officers, and a single tap would reveal a keypad to enter a code that would change once every 12 hours. There were a few staff. They had jumpsuits and lab coats on. A few of them were armed with only pistols, though there were armed and armored patrols with berets on like ours. The lab officer rubs his gloved hands together before then placing them behind his back, facing us with a cryptic smile. "We're taking off soon. I trust you've both been on a spaceship before, yes?" With his hands clasped together, he smiles at the both of us expectantly. Dunan and myself are still standing by each other's side, at attention. The lab officer makes a noise of surprise and then realization before reaching forward to wave his hands and pat both of our shoulders. "Oh, no, none of that. None of that for me." He brushes his epaulets as he intentionally shifts us from our stances, forcing us into a more disorganized place. I scratch my cheek as I watch them both. The lab officer explains, "I may have the rank of a lieutenant in this fleet. However, I don't command soldiers. I research and study for the sake of science, gentlemen. You two may even have the special and exclusive privilege of calling me Dr. Colton." Yes? He nods to our direction, a childlike excitement in his voice, his tail wagging as he continues, "I specialize in sapient augmentations. I used to work for the Directorate's pioneer for artificial intelligence as well. We are going to do so many great things together." He looks at us like we're prizes. It makes me feel uneasy, but Dunan's face has been neutral through this whole encounter. Dunan nods to Dr. Colton. "I look forward to it, sir," he said with a freezing neutral tone, then replied in the same manner, "We've never been on a spaceship before, sir." I speak up as well, though, with a little more reciprocation for this good doctor's friendliness. "Ah, yes, sir. I've never even been off planet before." Dr. Colton straightens his back and rubs his gloves together as he nods, turning towards one of the corridors as he then gestures for us to follow. He starts talking as he moves. "I won't bore you with the details then, fine gentlemen, but I will make you aware that being in an artificial gravity field may have its side effects. It will set in just about the planet's gravity reaching its critical weakness, where it will have to kick in because otherwise you'd break your neck hitting the ceiling." He nods with a glance over his shoulder at us. "It's happened before. Nothing too different than a regular commercial airline flight. I do recommend staying still if it's your first time being in one. There will be medics standing by on all phases of reaching space. But for now, you." Dr. Colton points at a young female officer, a brown Vulpine Rokandan. "Please show these specialists to their rooms. They should be assigned rooms next to each other." He glances at us as the other officer starts to browse on their datapad for information. "Please settle in. We'll be here for a few weeks until we reach our destination. But don't worry, it will fly by." He clasps his hands together with a smile. "We have much to do." He turned away, and his tail was still wagging. The officer approaches us with a datapad held close to her chest. "Follow me, please." I didn't expect to have my own room. I actually don't remember the last time I've had one of my own. It's a good bit of space. It's like quarters for an officer. Was this really my big break? I even have a cool window. I approach it, and it's the view of the ports. Billows of winds coming from below the ship as its thrusters calibrate and grow in power, the gusts could be seen clearly. Everything in the room was of a mute gray color. The window was thick. I could feel it when I placed my hands fully upon it. With the sky starting to turn from purple to deep blue, I caught a glance of my reflection. And of course I give it a charming smile, then a wink. What a handsome devil. I laugh a little to myself as I then brush my free hand through my extremely trimmed hair upon my head, rounding my free hand down to my neck as I comfort myself with a soft caress on my nape, feeling my well-kept fur. I did like not being shaggy like I was before coming here. Either way worked. People did compliment me on how soft my fur was at times. But besides that, I look around and my room is almost empty. I don't have my duffel bag that had my things. I wasn't irked very much. It was all issued stuff. I barely had anything from my past life. I left it all behind for a reason. I find that there's only a bed and a nightstand. The bed seems comfortable with white sheets and 3 pillows, full-sized. Not queen or king-sized, but hey, it's something. I stretch my shoulders as I get ready to perhaps slide on my belly onto the soft sheets. Placing both my hands upon the surface with circular motions opposite of each other on the texture, this was heaven. Or was I too used to scruffy hand-me-down rack covers? Did I deserve any of this? Why was I getting all of this? Again, I need to somehow grasp this kind of opportunity. Just with the commodities, I'm feeling like none of this is normal. How did I get in here? I have no idea. I hear a muffled alarm outside my door. That must be it. We're lifting off the ground. I decide to enjoy this as much as I can, readjusting my form of seating as I stare out at the window. I feel some form of vibrations under my boots. I look around at the room as the vibrations grow throughout the room. I feel like I'm in a rattling box as the view outside starts to slide downwards, more of the sky sliding in to take its place. And the higher we go, the vibrations start to grow less and less. I stand up as we start to reach the clouds. The peak of the mountains surrounding our fort start to meet the ship's height. Covered in trees, we are close to piercing through the clouds again. I feel my breath come in and stay like I'm about to lose my breath if I don't take it. And the view starts to slant. I gasp and instinctively reach for the window rim. But there's barely anything to grab onto. But then, there's another siren outside the door. I feel it in my bones, an unpleasant feeling that reverberates down my spine. I feel it in my jaw, in my shoulders, in my knees and feet. It makes me feel heavier. My lungs, heart, and stomach start to sink, and I instinctively gasp out in response, but I pant, breathless to nothing after just a short moment. The feeling is gone, and when I turn my head back to the view, the sea of clouds were slanted like a slope up a small hill. The blue sky starts to meet darker and darker self. We're moving to space. I laugh, and it all bursts out. I whoop and I cheer, throwing my arms out as I let it all wash over me, cheering at the window as I see more and more of the stars. Here I come. The joy was as sweet as it was brief. I savor the last chuckles as they turn into outward breaths, resting both my hands on the glass as I feel more weight on my heart. But I'm sure it isn't an artificial gravity field this time. It's everything that's brought me here. I'm left to my own thoughts and I blank out, my weak smile starting to fade as my eyes glaze. Looking at the great black ink with sparking white dots, the blue glow of the planet is starting to dissipate. We're in the stars. This is where the adventure begins, Brutus. It's all just the beginning, I tell myself. Hyping myself up, I knock on the thick glass with my knuckles and give myself another confident smile, tugging down on my uniform to straighten away any wrinkles. When I walk outside of my room, the door opens automatically with a heavy sideways slide into the wall. I'm able to lock it with a keypad that takes code, card, and handprint. They surely thought of everything. I glance at the people I pass in the long corridor, sparsely placed windows where you can peek into the ship's large hangar bay from which we entered. We were pretty high up, 2 stories high, I'd suppose. There were also some displays showing our location, the dates registered on our beginning location to our destination. From what I remember of space travel seminars, hyper-jumping or faster-than-light jumps can be instantaneous from the point of view of the ship and its crew, but a distance of a light year can take a full week for the world outside. For example, so my thick brain can understand, if a ship were to jump from its home port to another planet, a week would pass for both locations until the ship arrives at the latter, and say someone in the ship forgot to turn off their oven and has to return to the home port, well, it'd be an instantaneous return for whoever's done so when they jump back. And when they finally arrive in a blink of an eye, 2 weeks would have passed since the ship would have left, and the house would have been long burnt down by then. I turn my head back down the corridor. The crew members here all look fresh off training, young and eager faces. They walk with a proud stride, and I find myself readjusting to match, to fit in. I am wearing the same uniform after all. I strut my shoulders, and I notice some passers-by glance at my beret. I'm focused on moving to the so-called briefing room where Dunan had gone ahead. He didn't show any interest in finding his room, just took a peek, then walked off. I reach the assigned room, a laser-burned sign with the informed numbers and letters. The door's already slid open. I rest my hand on the rim of the door as I peek my head in. That's crazy. They roped you into it too, didn't they? Dunan spoke, his arms crossed with a furrowed brow as he was facing a shorter human lady with red hair. She had some augmentations already. Her eyes were replaced by a single cybernetic visor, red in color, shiny with a digital glow. She had cybernetic prosthetics from what I could was her hands. Who knows how far it went. Her name tag said Bishop. I glanced to the other corner of the room as Dunan and Bishop conversed. There was a giant of a Poliesu with their arms crossed, leaned back against a counter beside a coffee machine whirring. Poliesus were rare in the Directorate. They usually signed up to their own government's military. But I guess they must have bounced around governments, making them less trustworthy and therefore less common. But they are definitely tough. I can give them that. And I have no doubt in my mind or stomach that this guy can take me on and snap me in half. I mean, look at those shoulders and biceps. Whistle. Their name tag, Ahohako. Ahohako turned his head once the coffee machine beeped and finished. The Poliesu was bald with gray-colored skin. His beret was tucked into his gray uniform's epaulette. His teeth were visible from an apparent overbite. And goodness, were there plenty of teeth. His head turns as the coffee machine finishes whirring. He could be heard grunting as he then hopped off the counter to pour himself a cup. I couldn't help but notice the distinct fin most Poliesus had on their back. Trying to squeeze into alleyways must be a bitch. The briefing room was a lot like a break room with chairs added into it, though it did have a large display monitor on the largest wall of the room at its end. Beside it was a door that slid open. A Tavarian or avian with bright blue feathers walked in. She had focused yellow eyes. Her beak was black with a red mark on its base. The Tavarian had entered the room with a coat haul. The coat haul was of a dragon type, green-scaled with gray-colored wings. The gray would stripe down from her chin. The Tavarian's name tag had Oro, the Kothal's Zara. Everyone then started to notice me, the wolf Rokandan standing at the door just watching everyone. Ugh, like a creep. I put on my charming smile, but I feel like I'm stretching it too far, nodding upward at Ahohako when our eyes meet. His expression is a grungy one as well as neutral. His overbite and sharp teeth make them look grumpier. The intensity in his eyes didn't help, but he actually had intriguing eyes, bright purple. Oh, Bishop, you should meet Brutus. He's the only other batchmate I came in here with. Dunan came around and placed an arm around me, and I stood proudly with the bishop stepping in front of me. I nodded to her and smiled. "Hello, Bishop," I say awkwardly, but my tail was wagging excitedly, which Bishop leaned to the side to notice fully. She nodded, taking note, before her head turned upwards to meet my greater height. Her visor had a bright red line scanning from side to side, something like zipping coming from them like she's zooming in on something. Being placed under a microscope made me feel on edge, but basic preparation had prepared me for that. Then again, she's not my drill sergeant. I do, however, decide to wink. "See something you like?" I say in my charming manner, bumping my pecs left to right. That made the bishop smile. Her smile was natural, not covered by metal cybernetics. She had a bright one, and it sure was warm. She punched one of my pecs, and I laughed, placing my hand on where she hit. That sort of actually hurt. "Wow!" She laughs and pulls her cybernetic fist back from her punch. "You're an actual dork, Brutus. It's nice to meet ya. Also, I will let you know. I'm asexual, so I'm basically indifferent at best." She shrugs and walks past me, kicking me lightly with her boot heel as she walks towards Ahohako. She jumps up to meet the even greater-heighted Poliesu shark. Wringing them by the neck, though, Aho didn't seem to mind. In fact, actually more so focused on keeping their coffee unspilled. Bishop wiggled them, prompting an annoyed growl from Aho. "Now, this is Ahohako, but of course you can call them Aho or Ko. Bishop says in an introductory tone. Her voice was half robotic and half natural. Aho's eyes raised and he sighed with a wave. His large hands were larger than Bishop's face. Hello. His voice was much higher and smoother than I would have expected. Oh, bad Brutus. What did you expect? Fee-fee-fo-fum. Co here is my batchmate as well, picked up from the corners of the directorate where we had to be to not get in the way of all the rocks. That was several trips back. Been living at large here on Haleth with all the great caloric rations, stimulants, and training we can get. Now that's the life, ain't it, Co? Oh, damn, that smells good, Bishop says, as she then turns to grab a mug, requesting a hesitant Co for a cup of their prepared coffee. Dunan places a hand on my shoulder, and I turn my head with Oro and Zara approaching us. They seemed much more polite and reserved in contrast. The Tavarian, Oro, placed their hand over their left breast and gave a bow of their head. The Coathall, Zara, nodded her head as well with their greetings. I catch Dunan's side glance and we return the polite nods before I wave things off. Hey, no need to be so formal with us. We're nobody special, we're just like you. You know, I'm Brutus. Oro straightens up and nods before she speaks up. Of course, we just thought a respectful first impression would be good. We've only been here for a week, you see. Zara nods in agreement. Their wings flutter, then compress behind their backs. Zara spoke with a professional tone. It's a pleasure to be here and meet you. We're looking forward to what's to come with us in the same team. Dunan looked around and nodded with his hands on his hips. So it's going to be just us? Seems like a sort of squad. He looked to both doors of the room. Are we missing anyone? Just me. Dr. Colton stepped in with a small device in hand. Room attention! Heavy boots click together and everyone, including me, is facing the doctor. He silently waves at us with a bit of hesitation, his eyes narrowed with an expression that could translate into him just wanting to move on. At ease, everyone. He presses a button on the device, and the doors of the room shut closed, the keypads flanking a side of each then turn red, indicating that they're locked. The doctor nods and looks at everyone before he motions to the chairs in front of the screen as he turns it on with another press. This is everyone that we can muster from all the recruitment centers of the Directorate, from the Central Star System to its farthest edges. And the 6 of you are the only ones chosen out of potentially millions in the entirety of the Directory's reach. Specialists Ahohako, Bishop, Zara, Oro, Brutus, and Sung. The very first inducted into an exclusive and classified military program, as you know, you've signed the NDAs. And you're well aware of the consequences of breaking such, especially when it regards galactic and military security. But you're here because you are all well trusted, so I will not get into that. He presses a button and the banner of the fleet is displayed on the monitor. White on top, green at the bottom with a wavy border where they meet. A yellow fish in the very center of it all, arched like it has just jumped free of the waves. Dr. Colton continues, You have been integrated. Regionalized into a clan fleet rather than the general directorates, exclusive and better paid. You are now to serve Clan Colton. This was always a possibility when you joined the Directorate's armed forces. Private commissioning has been part of the system many times. Part of a system much larger than all of us, I'm afraid. He presses another button, and everyone's portraits show up in a 3x2 square on the screen. We look exactly like our pictures, staring back at all of us. Now that we're all collected, we can start on the briefing of what's to come. You will all undergo operations, augmentations that you all have agreed to. Another slide comes in, 3D models, animated and circular to show all manners of information. It's hard to keep up, but I can see all manner of prosthetics, little nanomachines, chipsets that are installed on all forms of body parts to reprogram your muscles and nerve tissue, stimulating every muscle for peak combat performance. This was the very forefront of our discovered technology. Standard effects are hard to determine, but we all are confident that your combat capabilities will be enhanced immensely. He puts his hands together with a smile to everyone. Enhanced strength, intelligence, speed, agility. Achieved through prosthetics, installed nanonests, cybernetization. It will all be your choice, with our advice, of course. You all are blessed with the physical, mental, and social capabilities to undergo these procedures. Your augmentations will be used on the field, and you will be placed on cryogenic stasis after every mission. He presses another button, and a video of a space station in orbit of a Cayenne planet, swirling ice storm clouds on the surface far, far below. Our base of operations is at the very frontier of the Directorate's known borders. Our orbital space station, Avamore. The room is silent as the doctor's eyes survey us slowly, a cryptic smile ever present on his face, a sense of unease in the air as we all watch him. The doctor lets out a sigh, placing his hands together. Tonight, I'll want you to be fully aware of your own selves, your own limitations, so that you may have a platform to jump and rise above from, for you will exceed any limitations set upon you beforehand. You will be near unstoppable forces of the Directorate, its interests, its government, and people, the ultimate servicers. Soon, you will be stuff of legend. But sadly, no one will know your names, only the names you earn for yourselves, the legacy you will not leave behind. But I take it you can all at least come to terms with at least being able to settle for the good that you will usher into the galaxy, and therefore the universe. There never was going back for any of you. I'm aware you've come from places that have abandoned you, places that have chased you into our care, a better place. But soon you will be figuratively and literally light years from all of that, in a place where you can hone who you would like to truly become. People of worth. To us, you're not test subjects, you're our future heroes. You will transcend time. It will soon be nothing to you. You are set on an adventure of multiple lifetimes, Rangers. You will all outlive me, I'm sure. But I will be none prouder to have set you on this path with the best equipment the clan and Directorate can manufacture and provide. You are the tip of the spear of the new world of warfare, pioneers. Recall, Rangers. We were given anything we wanted as our meals before our operations, like a final meal. I asked for a cigarette. They declined, so I asked for spicy chicken instead. Granted. I've undergone multiple tests that spanned days, stared out at the black pit of space outside my room. I've been injected multiple times with preparatory stimulants, spent hours in chairs strapped to machines where they gathered data and also inputted data into chipsets they had installed into me. I was set to be infused with a nanonest, tiny little ant-like creatures that fuse with my muscles and fuse together over my body. I can hear the little scratching when they spread up to my neck during stimulation tests in the operation. It all comes in and out in gaps and phases of black, linked with strapped masks, gassing me with chemicals that numb everything that put me under. But what they're doing to me is almost lessening their effect. My eyes open through very thin slits to glance up at Dr. Colton in his surgery wear, glancing down at me with his cryptic eyes still. It's like his expression never changes. How peculiar. Who will I wake up to be at the end of this?